taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
The year was 1956, and the world was enjoying the glorious technicolor of Alexander the Great.
The man who thought he was a god.
And the youth was being hypnotized by Elvis Presley and his gyrations. And at the same time, the USA was being introduced to a complicated man.
It's not hate to say that we were kidnapped and brought here, it's true.
A man who had lived many lives and died at least twice.
I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago.
A man raised in poverty who grew up bad.
You can't be a Negro in America and not have a criminal record.
A man whose silver tongue and quick wit built up the religious institution that would kill him.
The price of freedom is death.
A man whose name used to be Malcolm Little, but we know him today as Malcolm X. Now, I don't want to get bogged down into too many details, but there is a lot that Malcolm reflects on later. The important thing is that from the day Malcolm X is born, he's born into a racialized world. You know, more than being born black in the US during Jim Crow. Malcolm X was born in 1925 to Louise and Earl Little. Malcolm's mother was the product of rape, and so she lived resenting her lighter skin. His dad was a preacher who spread the word of Marcus Garvey, which presented a solution to the black man's problems in the USA. Leave and go to Africa, which some people did, but that's a whole video in itself. His mother and father would argue regularly, but it always seemed that there was food on the table and that their parents really did love them. What is important is that from the beginning of Malcolm's life, there was a stronger racial component than even other African Americans at the time. So much so that Malcolm, who had lighter skin than his siblings, said he was favored by his father, but he'd get whipped harder by his mother. His father's preaching was a key component to Malcolm's early life and caused the family to move around a lot. They would move to a new town, settle in, and it was always a matter of when, not if, they would be run out by the Klan or someone with Klan-like features. Which ends up with Malcolm's dad, Earl, dying at the hands of the Black Legion, which were a bunch of racists like the Klan, but like reskinned. Now, if you read the Wikipedia page, which all good research starts in, says that Louise rented out part of her garden and the boys hunted to make ends meet, which is a really nice way of saying that from that point on, they basically lived on the edge of starvation. At times they'd be so hungry that they'd be dizzy, and Malcolm's mum would boil up a pot of dandelion greens. Despite this, Malcolm says he generally did well in school and he got good grades. And in his high school years, he became the class president. Malcolm's childhood is rough, and it only gets rougher when his mother breaks down and is committed to an insane asylum. The state breaks up the family and the children are fostered out to different families, with Malcolm being fostered to a white family. Despite all of this, Malcolm wanted to become a lawyer, and even though he had the grades and showed clear academic ability, he was told at school that he should just be a carpenter, that law wasn't for him or people like him. Even though things had always been tough, this reality starts to break down Malcolm's world, and it really does begin his slide into crime. The big takeaways here is that Malcolm grew up poor, extraordinarily poor, and he grew up in an incredibly racialized household. And even though he probably didn't process it at the time, it shaped his view on race to be incredibly specific, that the white man is the devil without exception.
The white man pays Reverend Martin Luther King, subsidizes Reverend Martin Luther King, so that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man.
Malcolm ends up moving to live with his sister in Boston. He gets overwhelmed with the slick city lifestyle and jazz and zoot suits. In contrast to his later image of a slick, well-dressed, well-spoken man, Malcolm X was the hippest cat in town, with light straightened hair doing the Lindy Hop with the ladies. Malcolm worked a few odd jobs and eventually he got a job shining shoes. And it sounds like living in the black ghetto with all the music and dancing was brutal. As portrayed by Malcolm, life seems to revolve around using somebody or getting used by somebody. White people of both genders going to the ghetto to do drugs and get some easy sex. Vicious cycles of debt. And the main way people are going to survive is doing something that is illegal. Even Malcolm's shining shoes was really making money selling booze and reefers and condoms and hooking people up with this or that hooker. And Malcolm at this point slides into progressively more intense street crimes, evading the police and carrying guns, till eventually he gets arrested after a string of high-end burglaries. He goes in to pawn a watch and the police are there waiting for him. The police are surprised when Malcolm draws his pistol and hands it over.
No Negro leaders have fought for civil rights.
What do you mean
They
by
have
fought?
begged for civil rights. They have begged the white man for civil rights. They have begged the white man for freedom. And anytime you beg another man to set you free, you will never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourself.
Malcolm ends up in prison, and this is where Malcolm Little starts to become Malcolm X. Throughout the early part of his time in prison, Malcolm X sounds like a real piece of shit, and he was especially bad to the chaplain that he was nicknamed Satan. While he was in prison, Malcolm's family constantly sent him letters, and these letters all seem to have a similar theme: the natural religion of the black man. Malcolm reacted to this incredibly negatively. Long story short, it's not until his brother Reginald, who he's very close to, sent him a letter saying, "Don't smoke or eat pork anymore. I can get you out of prison." Knowing a scam when he sees one, he did exactly that. And what Malcolm didn't realize is that his entire family had joined a cult, the Nation of Islam. Which has how much to do with Islam? Here's some reasons why they're incompatible. Malcolm had been naturally suspicious of a lot of things, and this all changed when his brother sat him down and said, "What if I told you God was a black man, just like us? And the devil is also a man, the white man." He also explained to Malcolm that not only were white men devils, they also know they are devils. Every white person, without exception. Malcolm said he played back in his mind all the white people he'd ever met, and he implies that it started to make sense. To use a phrase that Malcolm would use a lot in his book, he couldn't think of a white person who hadn't took something from him or done something to him. Besides joining the Nation of Islam, prison was important for two other reasons. The first is that Malcolm starts his ferocious appetite for learning. At one point, he copies down the entire dictionary, going letter by letter and then remembering the words. Second, he gets involved in formal debates in prison. While Malcolm had always been smart, he started to sharpen his mind towards debate. This was the beginning of the death of Malcolm Little and the awakening of Malcolm X.
Many of our people turn to crime. Stealing, gambling, prostitution, organized crime. Crime that has been organized here in Holland by the white man. You don't organize any crime. He organizes the crime. He sells you whiskey and then locks you up when he catches you drunk. He sells you a deck of cards and locks you up when he catches you using them, while you are dealing with nothing but a deceitful, blue-eyed devil walking around here on this earth who will lead you to nowhere but hell as long as you follow him.
Let's just have a quick word on some of the background to the Nation of Islam. The man who founded the Nation of Islam was Wallace Fard Muhammad. And he didn't just say he was a messenger of Allah, he was Allah. And if you're an actual Muslim, you might realize that this is insane. Elijah Muhammad essentially becomes the leader of the Nation of Islam, but he gets thrown into jail for draft dodging during World War II. And when he gets out of prison, the Nation of Islam is very fractured and small. Elijah Muhammad, by the way, is not just a messenger of Allah, he is Muhammad, allegedly.
This coming destruction of the white man, will there be any bloodshed?
There will be plenty of bloodshed.
Have you ever been accused, sir, of preaching hate?
Yes.
Do you think you are preaching hate?
No.
At its peak, the nation would have hundreds of thousands of members. And even today, after an attempt to convert to Sunni Islam, controversy, a complete collapse, the numbers are still in the tens of thousands. While the Nation of Islam shapes Malcolm X also shaped the Nation of Islam. When Malcolm X leaves prison and starts attending the nation's services, there's only 2 temples. But after Malcolm starts attending services, So there are 2 temples, one in Detroit, one in Chicago, and although it's hard to believe, Malcolm X himself says that when they came together in 1952, there were no more than 200 members at their combined meeting. But the membership would soon reach the hundreds of thousands, thanks mainly to Malcolm X. When I say Malcolm built the Nation of Islam, I'm not being hyperbolic. The foundation existed. He did join an organization, but after meeting Elijah Muhammad, he said that a lot of the people there were waiting for Allah to deliver a larger congregation. And he said they needed to go out and get that larger congregation. So Malcolm X used what he had, the gift that was given to him, his silver tongue, to go and talk to the dirtiest, grimiest people, drug dealers, drug users, alcoholics, homeless people. It didn't matter to Malcolm X. Every black person was somebody who could be saved by the Nation of Islam.
Well, number one, if you notice, the stick that I always used in defending the Muslim movement was the fact that it had the ability to reform the morals of the so-called Negro community. It eliminated drug addiction, alcoholism, fornication, adultery, loose sexual behavior, which meant that it eliminated bastard babies, illegitimate children. Well, as long as I knew that this was what it represented and it gave me a strong stick, I could represent it and defend it.
And it's something that Malcolm would do until his death. He just seemed to like to talk to people. He would walk the street and have conversations with people. Malcolm X was so successful with his speaking that he would go town to town, city to city, preaching to people out of shop fronts until the membership would be so large that it could support a new temple. Malcolm X was directly connected or responsible for the founding of almost all of the nation's temples. He was the main point of contact for the leadership, as well as just the general public and the media. He featured on TV shows, radio shows, he had debates. The Nation of Islam wasn't the only black nationalist movement, but it was, and still largely is, the most successful. And that success was because of Malcolm X. Not that Malcolm X would have accepted any of the praise. All the praise was to Allah and
the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
A really important thing to realize at this point is that according to Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad can do no wrong. He is the messenger of Allah.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad makes black people brave enough, men enough to defend ourselves no matter what the odds are. He's actually telling Negroes to defend themselves against violent people.
Right at the beginning of the Nation of Islam's meteoric rise, Malcolm is told by Elijah Muhammad, "I want you to be well known because it will make me well known. But you'll grow to be hated when you become well known because people get jealous of public figures." Malcolm X was the face of the Nation of Islam, beyond even Elijah Muhammad himself. In 1961, as Elijah Muhammad declines into old age, people began whispering in his ear, Malcolm's trying to take the nation for himself. And on the other end of it, Malcolm's trying to turn down interviews and offers to be on the covers of magazines because he wants to suppress the jealousy. As this is building, there's a lot of controversy around Elijah Muhammad.
Who is the father of all of these various children?
Elijah Muhammad was the father of their children, and I took it to him. And it was at that time he told me that he was Muhammad, the prophet, and that Muhammad had 9 wives. He also told me that he was David. He was the modern David, and that he was the modern Solomon, and that it was meant for him to fulfill today all of the things that they did back there.
He'd been sleeping with and gotten pregnant several of his assistants, some of which were also underage. Malcolm goes into damage control. He starts explaining to his ministers what they should say to their congregations, who they should be talking to, and who they shouldn't be talking to.
The only reason that I didn't make this public knowledge was I knew the implications, and I felt that if the Muslims who were in the Nation of Islam knew it, that which enabled them to be so strongly religious and exercise moral discipline would be shattered, and it would cause all of them to go right back and start doing the things that they had been doing previously.
But this is going to be used later to prove Malcolm's guilt, and it all comes to a head in 1963.
That over? Well, I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
They were distorted?
And yes. And,
what did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate. But only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing.
But you did not say that you were glad the president was killed.
No, that's what the press said. What will I look like saying that I'm glad the president was killed?
Malcolm X was silenced from speaking publicly for 90 days for comments about several events as well as the assassination of the president. Malcolm had said far more inflammatory things before, and so he thought this was very unfair, but he still submitted to his punishment. And even though there was a punishment, it was only 90 days of no speaking to the public. And then it was only 90 days of no speaking in the Nation of Islam. And then Malcolm read in the newspaper that when he was willing to submit to Elijah Muhammad, his 90 days would begin. Malcolm saw the writing on the wall. Rather than seeing the discussions with the ministers as helpful, he was accused of spreading rumors about Elijah Muhammad and that he was eventually trying to seek power himself. Malcolm mentions that his old hustler's instincts kicked in. He was being set up, and a Temple 7 official, maybe this piece of shit, was leading the charge.
Malcolm, this was your first public statement in that 90-day period, is it not?
First time I opened up my mouth in 90 days. That's why I'm talking so fast and so hearty.
You feel, however, that we're making progress?
No. I will never say that progress is being made. Knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches. There's no progress. You pull it all the way out, that's not progress. The progress is healing the wound that the blow made. And they haven't even begun to pull a knife out, much less try and heal the wound. They won't even admit the knife is there.
That Malcolm was a true believer in Elijah Muhammad. Everything he did was for Elijah, and Elijah could do no wrong because he had been ordained by Allah himself. In his autobiography, Malcolm describes it like this: "Every second of my 12 years with Mr. Muhammad, I've been ready to lay down my life for him. If Mr. Muhammad had committed a crime punishable by death, I would have proven that I did it, and I would have gone to the electric chair as Mr. Muhammad's servant." Malcolm X's faith in Elijah Muhammad was total. But now Malcolm was out of the Nation of Islam, he knew exactly what was going to happen to him. The Muslims were given the impression that I rebelled against Mr. Muhammad. I could now anticipate step 2. I would remain suspended and later isolated indefinitely. Finally, step 3 would be to provoke some Muslim ignorant of the truth to take it upon himself to kill me as a religious duty. In the meantime, Malcolm X went and chilled with his good friend Cassius Clay. According to Malcolm, the Nation of Islam didn't want to publicly associate with the future Muhammad Ali because they felt he would lose to Sonny Liston. After the first direct order from a Mosque 7 official to have Malcolm killed, he goes through what he described as a mental divorce. He decides to start his own organization, and he goes on his pilgrimage, on his Hajj to Mecca. I went over that a bit in my first video on Malcolm X, so I won't retread it. Suffice to say, he comes back with a more open view to race. He also became very politically active with civil rights leaders as well. He had always secretly wanted the Nation of Islam to be more present in the struggle for civil rights, to be on the front lines at places like Little Rock. But he's only outside of the Nation of Islam for 11 months. And over that 11 months, Malcolm has several attempts on his life, which you can catch in my second video on Who Killed Malcolm X. Eventually he runs out of luck while giving a speech in the Audubon Ballroom, and Malcolm is shot 21 times and killed.
But being friendly and being a friend, I think, are two different things. And I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
This is like extracurricular activities for myself so I can shine. You know what I'm saying?
So while I was researching this, I came across a few questions that I thought were interesting or kind of just frustrating, and I kind of like to answer those now. Was Malcolm X racist? And the answer is basically, yeah. Next question. Did Malcolm X die racist? Probably not, or at least he was on the way to not being racist. But for a lot of his history, and especially during his time in the Nation of Islam, he was racist. But I don't think we should paint him with the same brush as people in the KKK. Malcolm X's racism is built on 400 years of persecution, slavery, rape, murder, all of the bad things. It's a reactionary racism, and it's still a supremacy, but it's not the same as white supremacy. I don't think we should condone it. I don't think we should be okay with it, but it's not interchangeable. The closest thing you kind of get to Malcolm saying something openly hostile is this.
If he's not ready to clean his house up, he shouldn't have a house. It should catch on fire and burn down.
The next question, was Malcolm X gay? Because this guy thinks he was. And from what I could find, the only semi-credible story is Malcolm's sister saying that Malcolm X went to an old man's house and he would sprinkle talcum powder on him and he would the nut. Malcolm X actually goes over that story in his book, and it's not him, but one of his accomplices. Is it possible that Malcolm actually did it? Maybe, but it's just as likely that it was misremembered or changed, because after Malcolm leaves the Nation of Islam, there is a lot of attempts to damage his character. Either way, a handful of half-truths and rumors isn't something to get excited about, and we have to remember that the people like this have an agenda. And he even states it in the article. He says if one of the strongest black voices in history was gay, then that would be huge for the gay community. But I don't think we should be revising history to make this sort of jam in. The last question that I had, and this seems to be quite a controversial one, is what did Malcolm X even do for civil rights? And he didn't really do anything. And you can watch my video about that over here. I don't think it's controversial to say that Malcolm X wasn't a civil rights leader. And that's what really got me into this, is I'm a teacher and I teach civil rights. And I remember saying to another teacher, we should teach about Malcolm X. We should include a little bit about him. And they said, that's awesome. Let's do it. Find something that he did for civil rights. And try as I might, I couldn't really find anything that he did. For most of his time in the spotlight, he was against civil rights. He was the opposition to civil rights.
We don't endorse passive resistance. We don't endorse nonviolence. We don't endorse any kind of peaceful suffering. In fact, we don't endorse anything that's advocated by Martin Luther King.
At the end of the day, Malcolm X's legacy is always going to be controversial. Was he the militant black nationalist who fired up crowds and destabilized America? Or the voice that many black people felt needed to be heard? In a way, he's all of those things. But Malcolm was a once-in-a-lifetime leader. He wasn't born to leadership. He was molded and shaped by events in his life. And it seems as though he had a deep-seated need to right wrongs. Throughout his life, it seems like Malcolm was a person who struggled to do nothing. He always had to be active. When he was a kid, he overcame hardship, and when he was a street hustler, he was the best street hustler. And when he left prison and joined a little cult called the Nation of Islam, he wanted what he thought was good for his people, what was good for the nation. Keeping that in mind, it is easy to overplay Malcolm X's legacy and his part that he actually had in the civil rights movement. A lot of people put him in opposition to Martin Luther King, and Martin Luther King achieves a lot, and so therefore Malcolm X must have been an equivalent and opposite force until they agreed with one another, and that's just not the case. The Nation of Islam, and eventually just Malcolm X by himself, were seen to be a whole bunch of talk and not a lot of action, and Martin Luther King is out there getting results. He's getting things passed. He's talking to people in power, and he's fixing the things that he can. But as we move forward, we do see the effect of Malcolm X, and a lot of it is reflected in things like the Black Panthers, right? Or the BLM movement. The ongoing fight for equality is fought on top of a foundation that Malcolm X built. Now that we're basically at the end of the video, I just wanted to finish off by reading the very last paragraph of Malcolm X's autobiography. Yes, I have cherished my demagogue role. I know that societies often have killed the people who have helped to change those societies. And if I can die having brought any light, having exposed any meaningful truth that will help destroy the racist cancer that is malignant in the body of America, then all of the credit is due to Allah. Only the mistakes have been mine. Sorry this video is so late. The second bit is actually filmed 2 months after the first bit. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think that Malcolm X was a civil rights leader? Do you think that he did anything at all? Do you think that he would have been able to do much more if he'd lived much longer? Yeah. Like, subscribe, comment, all that jazz, and I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.
Push and crack like we invented it. Chef Cool, Louis, Ruben, Duffel got 10 in that. The Kobe Jordan pack, we was kicking in. Anti-social, social club with the snap. shoot a